The studio lights dimmed. Ellen DeGeneres froze mid-sentence, her signature smile vanishing as she stared at the 16-year-old girl sitting across from her. What happened in the next 60 seconds would become the most emotional moment in daytime television history. Because sometimes, when a teenager's pain meets unexpected kindness, magic doesn't just happen, it explodes across millions of hearts. Nobody in that studio audience knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. Not the cameras rolling, not the producers frantically whispering into their headsets, and certainly not Mia Rodriguez, the quiet high school junior from Phoenix, who thought she was just there to meet her hero. But Ellen knew. Ellen had been planning this moment for 3 weeks, ever since Mia's story had landed on her desk through a letter that made her cry in her dressing room. The letter was simple, heartbreaking, real, written in the careful handwriting of someone who had learned to make herself invisible. Dear Ellen, I don't think I matter to anyone. The kids at school call me names every day. They push me in the hallways. They throw food at me during lunch. The only thing that gets me through is listening to Taylor Swift. Her music reminds me that maybe someday, somewhere, someone will see me as enough. I know you probably won't read this, but if you do, thank you for making people laugh. Sometimes your show is the only good part of my day. But this is where the story gets incredible. Because Ellen did read it, and what she did next changed everything. 3 weeks before taping, Ellen had done something she'd never done in 15 years of hosting. She called Taylor Swift personally, not through managers, not through publicists. She called Taylor's personal number and said 5 words that would make the superstar drop everything. There's a girl who needs us. Now, as Mia sat in that guest chair wearing her best dress, a simple blue one she'd bought at Goodwill specifically for this moment, she had no idea that her entire life was about to transform. Ellen leaned forward, her voice gentler than usual, carrying none of her typical playful energy. Mia, tell me about school. How's junior year treating you? Mia's hands trembled slightly. Being on Ellen was surreal enough, but something in Ellen's tone made her realize this wasn't going to be a typical interview. The studio audience, 300 people strong, sensed the shift too. The usual pre-show energy had settled into something deeper, more attentive. It's okay, Mia said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the microphones. I mean, school is hard for everyone, right? Ellen studied her face. In 15 years of interviewing thousands of guests, she had developed an instinct for reading people. And everything about Mia, the way she held her shoulders slightly hunched, the careful way she chose her words, the faint sadness behind her eyes, told Ellen this girl was carrying something too heavy for 16-year-old shoulders. Mia, can I ask you something real? Just between us? Ellen glanced at the audience, then back at Mia. What's the hardest part about being 16? The question hung in the air. Mia looked down at her hands, then out at the audience. 300 strangers watching. Millions more would see this on television. For a moment, Ellen wondered if she had pushed too far, too fast. But then Mia looked directly at Ellen, and something shifted. Maybe it was Ellen's genuine tone. Maybe it was the safety of being in a place where kindness was the rule rather than the exception. Or maybe Mia was just tired of carrying her pain alone. The hardest part, Mia said, her voice growing stronger, is feeling invisible. Like you don't matter. Like you could disappear, and no one would notice. The studio went quiet. Ellen felt her heart break a little. Behind the cameras, producers who had seen everything in daytime television found themselves leaning in. Tell me more about that feeling, Ellen said softly, and Mia did. She told Ellen about walking through school hallways where kids would literally step aside and whisper about her, about sitting alone at lunch while groups of popular kids threw napkins at her table, about the Instagram posts where her classmates would screenshot her photos and add cruel captions, about coming home and crying while listening to Taylor Swift because Taylor's lyrics about being different, about being picked on, about rising above it all, were the only things that made her feel less alone. There's this one song, Mia said, her voice cracking slightly. Mean. When Taylor sings about being criticized and hurt, but knowing someday she'll be living in a big city and they'll still be mean. I listen to that and imagine maybe someday I'll matter to someone too. Ellen nodded, tears forming in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet, because she had a secret, and it was time. Mia, what if I told you that someone very special has been listening to our conversation? Mia looked confused. What do you mean? Ellen stood up from her chair, walked to the side of the stage, and did something that made the entire studio gasp. She gestured toward the wings, and out walked Taylor Swift. The audience erupted, screaming, crying, applauding. But Ellen was watching Mia, who had gone completely still. Her mouth fell open, her hands flew to her face, and then she started sobbing. Taylor Swift, the global superstar who could have been anywhere in the world, walked directly to Mia's chair, knelt down in front of her, and took her hands. "Hi, beautiful," Taylor said, her own voice thick with emotion. "I heard you've been going through a really hard time." Mia couldn't speak. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, staring at the woman whose music had carried her through the darkest moments of her young life. But this is where the story becomes something nobody expected. Something that would change not just Mia's life, but how millions of people thought about kindness, about seeing each other, about the power of showing up for someone who feels invisible. Taylor looked directly into Mia's eyes. "Can I tell you something? When I was your age, I was bullied too. Kids made fun of my hair, my clothes, the fact that I loved country music. They called me weird. They made me feel exactly like you feel right now, invisible and not enough." The studio was completely silent. Even Ellen, who had orchestrated this moment, was crying openly now. "But here's what I learned," Taylor continued. "Those people who are mean to you, they're not mean because of who you are. They're mean because they're unhappy with who they are. And you, sweet girl, you are enough. You are so much more than enough." Taylor reached into her pocket and pulled out something that made Mia gasp again. It was a handwritten letter, but not just any letter. It was the original letter Mia had sent to Ellen, now covered in Taylor's handwriting. "Ellen sent me your letter," Taylor explained, "and I wrote you back. But instead of mailing it, I wanted to give it to you in person." Mia took the letter with trembling hands. Through her tears, she read Taylor's response, written in purple ink around the margins of her original words. "Your words matter. Your voice matters. You matter. The kids who are cruel to you now will grow up to realize what they missed, the chance to know someone genuinely beautiful. But their loss is the world's gain, because you're going to do incredible things. I believe in you. Love, Taylor." But Taylor wasn't finished. She looked at Ellen, who nodded, and then back at Mia. "There's something else. Ellen told me you love to write songs, that you've been writing since you were 12, but you've never shared them with anyone, because you're afraid people will make fun of them." Mia nodded, still unable to speak. "Well, I brought my guitar today, and I was wondering, would you sing one of your songs with me, right here, right now, in front of all these people who came here to support you?" The studio audience went wild again, but Mia looked terrified. Ellen could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had kept her silent at school, that had made her feel invisible. Ellen walked over and knelt beside Taylor. "Mia, sweetheart, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. But I want you to know something. Everyone in this room is on your team. Everyone watching at home is on your team. This is your moment to be seen, really seen." Mia looked around the studio, 300 faces looking back at her with love, encouragement, and anticipation. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was the center of attention, and it felt safe. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'm really scared." "Scared is okay," Taylor said, standing up and gesturing for someone to bring her guitar. "I'm scared every time I perform. The difference is, when you're scared but you do it anyway, that's when magic happens." Taylor's guitar was brought out, and she sat down next to Mia. "What's your song about?" "It's called Invisible Girl," Mia said quietly. "It's about feeling like you don't exist, but hoping that someday someone will see you." Taylor's eyes filled with tears. "That's beautiful. Will you teach it to me?" What happened next was beyond anything Ellen had imagined when she planned this surprise. Mia, this quiet, bullied teenager who had felt invisible for years, began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, shaky with nerves, but as Taylor joined in with gentle guitar chords, something incredible happened. Mia's voice grew stronger. The lyrics, born from pain but filled with hope, floated through the studio. "I walk these halls like I'm not here, like I'm made of glass and air. They look right through me every day, like I'm just in their way. But somewhere deep inside I know, this invisible girl's gonna grow into someone they can't ignore, someone worth so much more." By the second verse, the entire audience was singing along, even though they'd never heard the song before. The melody was simple, universal, the kind of tune that sticks in your heart immediately. But it was the words, Mia's words, born from her experience, her pain, her hope, that made grown adults in the audience cry. When the song ended, the studio exploded. Standing ovation, tears, cheering that went on for nearly 3 minutes. Mia sat there, still holding the microphone, looking stunned. For the first time in her life, she had been not just seen but celebrated. Ellen stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Mia, that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard on this show." But Taylor had one more surprise. She looked at Ellen, who nodded, then turned back to Mia. Mia, I want to ask you something. How would you feel about recording that song? Like professionally? In a real studio? Mia's eyes went wide. What do you mean? I mean, I want to help you record Invisible Girl and release it, not because I feel sorry for you, but because that song deserves to be heard, because other kids who feel invisible need to hear those words, because you have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. The audience was on their feet again, but Mia was looking at Taylor with an expression of pure disbelief. You want to record my song? I want to do more than that, Taylor said, glancing at Ellen. I want to invite you to come to Nashville, to spend a week with me and my team, to learn about songwriting, about recording, about the music business, and then, if you want, we'll record Invisible Girl and release it. The proceeds will go to anti-bullying organizations, but more importantly, your voice will be heard by millions of people. Mia started crying again, but these were different tears. These were tears of joy, of disbelief, of a future she had never dared to imagine. Ellen wiped her own eyes and looked at the camera. You know what, folks? This is why we do this show. Not for the laughs, though we love those too, but for moments like this, moments when someone who felt invisible realizes they've been seen all along. The show ended with Taylor and Mia hugging, with Ellen joining them, with the entire audience on their feet, but the real story was just beginning. 3 months later, Invisible Girl was released as a single, Mia's original version produced by Taylor Swift's team, backed by some of Nashville's best musicians, but featuring Mia's authentic, heartfelt vocals front and center. The song went viral immediately, not because of Taylor Swift's involvement, but because millions of people, kids and adults alike, connected with Mia's story. The music video, which featured real teenagers who had been bullied, along with their stories of overcoming adversity, was viewed over 50 million times in its first month. But the most beautiful part wasn't the commercial success. It was the messages Mia started receiving. Thousands of letters, emails, and social media posts from kids all over the world saying the same thing. Thank you for making me feel less invisible. Mia's life changed completely, not just because of the song's success, but because she had found her voice. She started a blog about teen mental health. She began speaking at schools about bullying and self-worth. She used her platform to highlight other invisible kids, giving them the same gift Ellen and Taylor had given her, the chance to be seen. The bullying at her school didn't stop immediately, but something crucial had changed. Mia no longer felt invisible. She knew she mattered. And when you know you matter, other people's cruelty can't diminish you the same way. 6 months after the Ellen Show appearance, Mia was invited back. This time, she wasn't the scared, invisible girl who had walked onto that stage. She was confident, radiant, purpose-driven. She had found her voice, and she was using it to help others find theirs. You know what I learned? She told Ellen during her return visit. I was never actually invisible. I was just invisible to the wrong people. The right people. The people who matter. They saw me all along. Sometimes you just need someone to show you where to look. Ellen smiled, thinking about that first letter, about the moment she decided to call Taylor Swift, about the power of choosing to see someone who feels unseen. And sometimes, Ellen replied, you just need someone to remind you that your voice matters, that your story matters, that you matter. The camera panned out on the two of them laughing together, but if you looked closely, you could see something else in Mia's eyes. Not the scared uncertainty that had been there months earlier, but something new, the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are seen, heard, and valued, because that's what happens when kindness meets courage. That's what happens when celebrities use their platforms for more than entertainment. That's what happens when a talk show host remembers that her real job isn't to make people laugh, it's to make people feel less alone. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, that's what happens when a 16-year-old girl who felt invisible discovers that she was actually shining all along. She just needed someone to turn on the lights. The song Invisible Girl is still played at schools, at anti-bullying events, and in the bedrooms of teenagers who need to remember that they matter. And somewhere in Phoenix, a young woman who used to feel invisible is using her voice to make sure no other kid has to feel that way. Because that's the real magic of that day on Ellen. It wasn't just about one moment of kindness. It was about creating a ripple effect of visibility, of worthiness, of love that continues to spread, one invisible kid at a time. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves to be seen. Comment below if you've ever felt invisible and found your way back to being visible. And remember, someone out there is waiting to see your light. Don't keep them waiting too long.